Hello guys, it's Sean Messenger. I have another BakuTech review, well, re-review I guess, but this one is on Tri Falco. So this is a pretty unique Bakugan, and I'm actually excited to talk about this one, even though it's just one this time. This is definitely an interesting one here. You might know that there is kind of a bump on this one's back. Yeah, I will talk about that kind of at the end of the video when I do like the whole review portion, I guess you could say. Not review portion, competitive portion. We're talking about all the features of the Bakugan and how good they are. So I will get back to this in a little bit. But for now, let's go and open this up. This does have 3 modes as well, which is kind of another unique part about this thing. So let's go and open it up. And this is the first mode of it. So, yeah. This is the first mode. I'll actually just pull down the feet. And yes, it does have 2 soul pieces that are both metal. No cross pieces or anything, but still, 2 soul pieces is pretty nice. And yeah, this thing, this mode is not as good as the other 2 in most cases. So there's 2 uses for this mode compared to the other ones. First, double stands, having less space to take up. You can argue it's better for double stands, although it's a little bit debatable because of how this thing works. But the main thing is you actually have a low G power, so you can get some low G power wins with this mode. As you can see, it is only 180 Gs. That is very, very low. So yeah, you can definitely pull off some low G stuff with Tri Falco. There's actually the lowest G power, so even something like St. Aquis or one of the 2 modes from Twin Dobru, there we go, could not think of the name for a second. Those are both 200 Gs, so this is still lower. Only good counter to that would be Bone Skulls, which is has a with its gate card, because that gets reset to 0 Gs, and that's a meme. Anyway, but yeah, this thing, without any gimmicks, you know, cards and stuff, this is the lowest G power Bakugan. So there you go. So let me go ahead and change this thing into its second mode, which is a little bit more interesting, I would say. So yeah. Alright, so now in its second mode, again, just closed it back up. Let's open it up. And it opens up like this. Again, you do have the 2 soul pieces that kind of come out here. And yeah, opens up much, much larger this time. You can see that it is about the width of the card here. And then in terms of like length, yeah, you can just kind of get a view of that, kind of, not entirely, but yeah, it's like a decent sized Bakugan. It's not huge, but it is still pretty big. It's this thing doesn't have crazy attack power. I'm just gonna say right now, this thing is not crazy for attack. It definitely has more, you know, defensive occupancy uses, low G power, just kind of some trick shots. I'll get into that stuff later. But yeah, this thing, pretty bulky, pretty wide now. Also, the G power does change with this mode. You don't use this 180 anymore. You now use the 620, if it would focus on the 620. You just do this instead. There we go. That did not want to focus, but we got it. Alright. So yeah, this thing, actually pretty solid in this mode, but there's still one more mode left, which is a little strange, but it does still have some uses, so we'll get to that one now. Alright, so now in its final mode here, it opens up like this. So yeah, of course, let me just open up these soul pieces for, you know, the details of it. There we go. So now this, obviously you lose some occupancy here, but this kind of just acts as a barrier. Again, you can just tell by the width, this thing takes up a lot of room, and it holds its ground decently well, I would say. And the idea behind this mode is, yes, kind of more defense opposed to occupancy. I mean, the defense in the other one's pretty solid still. But this one, it's kind of a defense occupancy hybrid, I would say. This one loses out on the occupancy, at least to some extent, for more defense. And I think, it actually kind of works pretty well. Now, with that said, let's get just kind of into the main stuff here. Alright, so first up, what do I think of this thing? What is my personal score? This Bakugan's really, really strange, but I like it. I think personally I'm giving this thing a 9 out of 10. I just like this thing a lot, but how good is it? This is where we have some debate, because this is a very strange thing to rank, not because of the modes, but actually because of this thing back here, the little bump on the back. A lot of people just dismiss it for that and will say to, use like the red one, for example. The red one is considered to be a lot better. I think that normally, yes, I would say the red one's better, but this thing has a unique property. So if you actually kind of press down on this back piece when you're rolling, you can kind of get this thing to just launch at things. Kind of like how the Skyrus or like the Ingram things were supposed to work in like the Legacy series, where they're supposed to like jump. It's kind of like that, but it actually kind of functions properly. Now, this is definitely a weird strategy, because otherwise this thing just does not roll well, and it just rolls very awkwardly. But with that, it actually has some stuff going. Its attack's actually not bad, because it could just smack into things, and if it's not something bulky, it'll probably knock it off the card, which can be useful in some instances. But I think the red one also has the advantage, because when you're just rolling normally, you get a lot more control, which works better for like the second and third modes. But the first mode, I think, when you kind of can just escort yourself straight onto a card, you don't get as much control, which is why, it might be a problem, especially for this mode where you want to be like facing a certain way. But if you can just launch yourself with low Gs onto a card to open, it's actually pretty good, I would say, or for a double stand even, if you have something bulky out front. It's a really weird technique, and I'm not even sure if I could do that right, or if I'm even doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But just from when I've tested it, that's just kind of how I've gotten it to work, and how it's functioned for me. I mean, I've gotten some crit KOs with it. I've messed around with this thing quite a lot just over the years. I've had this thing for over 7 years now. I've messed around with it a decent bit, but it's such a weird Bakugan. To me, this version and the red version are like relative, because the red one functions normally. This one doesn't, which hurts it, but also has some extra stuff that the red one no longer has. I know a lot of people just will like the red one. I would just say overall, yeah, the red one is probably, I would say, just the more normal one to use. But this one, I'm still giving it the same rating, because it just has some weird stuff that nothing else has. And I think that's kind of cool. But also it does sort of hurt it, also not. It's a process. I don't, like, it's just kind of a preference thing, I think. But most people prefer the red one, which I don't blame anyone for that. But still, rating's going to be the same for me. But yeah. Now the modes. The first mode, like I said, you can do some double stands with this thing. It is a little bit awkward. If you can get this thing to work properly and are really good at just launching this thing specifically, you can definitely do some double stands, but it is still a little awkward. But also low G power setups, this thing works very, very nicely for. Second and third modes, I think second mode you have a decent occupancy Bakugan. That's fine. Third mode, decent defense Bakugan. Second and third modes are both like pretty solid, I would say, but nothing crazy. But having the options there is really nice. But the main thing is, I think the first mode, you do get that double stand capability, as well as the, especially like the low G power, and being the lowest G power setup outside of Bone Skulls and its gate card. But again, that requires a gate card. This doesn't. And the last thing of note of this thing is it is a Ventus Bakugan. Ventus is the least represented attribute in all of BakuTech. However, Ventus is a strange attribute because despite being the least represented, you have some terrifying Bakugan in it. You can actually have a Ventus Gogaryu, which is insane. Windmill is kind of scary. And then you have this thing, which can work pretty well. You know, is kind of a defensive Ventus Bakugan, plus, you know, low G power. Kalukin you could have for some control stuff. Spin Shots works well with that stuff, you know, because of its diagonal cross pieces. Ventus is a pretty scary attribute, not gonna lie, but if you're going like mono Ventus, I think this is like a pretty solid thing to use, and I would probably recommend it in a Ventus deck. Or, well, maybe, I don't know. Either this or Kalukin, one of the two. I think you should probably be using Gogaryu and Windmill, but I don't know. I think this one is a pretty worthy contender. I think it's better than Kalukin overall, but that's up for debate. In a general setting, though, this thing is, like, still solid. I mean, the low G power setups might actually make it worth using just in general if you want to go that route, so you have that. But yeah, I think it's just kind of that. I mean, to me, it just feels kind of like a St. Aquas with how it has like a big mode and like a small mode, but then this one also has like the more defensive one, the lower G power. I'd almost argue it's like a little bit of a better St. Aquas. You know, that's a pretty basic one to compare it to, and I think, you know what, it's pretty cool. Have some stuff going for it. Overall, my score, this might be controversial, but I'm giving this thing an 8 out of 10. I think it's actually really good. Because again, you have the occupancy defense stuff going for it. But the low G power, you know, that kind of makes it pretty nice. I mean, it's a pretty strong setup there. And again, between the red and the normal, the red, you just got kind of a normal Bakugan that kind of functions. This thing's just strange, man. You gotta make your own conclusions in this one, I think. It's just such a weird design choice on this part. I don't even know how I should go about talking about it sometimes, but I try to here. So yeah, hopefully that is a good enough review of it. Again, that part is just really strange. So that's the review of it, though. So that's everything for Tri Falco. And yeah, that's all for this review. So anyway, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.